and she was like, "Hey Gilgamesh, I heard you were a great hero. I have a really big crush on you, so you should marry me. I'll give you a chariot. Sound good?" Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name's Leanna if you're new, and welcome to episode 19 of Makeup and Mythology, a series I'm doing on my channel where I do my makeup and also tell you an ancient myth. So in last week's episode, I covered the Filipino god of the moon and homosexuality, Libulan, and how he came to become the moon, and also the story of how he fell in love with the god of death. This week we're doing the Sumerian myth of Gilgamesh, which is actually based on a real person, which I didn't know. Shout out to Allison for suggesting this one. So it's been a while since I took AP World History, so I had to look this up. But Sumer is the earliest known civilization in ancient Mesopotamia. And if you didn't know, Mesopotamia was located in the region now known as the Middle East. So the story of Gilgamesh is told by the Epic of Gilgamesh, an epic poem that is known as the earliest surviving notable literature, and also the first great masterpiece of world literature ever. So it's definitely really, really old and really significant. And this is how it goes. Once upon a time, in the ancient Sumerian city of Uruk, or Uruk, I'm not actually sure how to pronounce that, there was a wise, powerful tyrant king named Gilgamesh. So it was said that he was 2/3 god and 1/3 mortal, which I think is an interesting split. And he was a famous war hero and wrestler. The epic also details that he was extremely horny, and he would abduct any woman he wanted regardless of whether or not she was married, which is gross. And the people of Uruk were sick and tired of his bullshit, as they should be, but they were also scared because he was a very powerful man and nobody could overcome him. He was part god after all. So the people prayed to the Earth Mother goddess Aruru, who was thought to have created mankind, to create a man who could overpower Gilgamesh in a wrestling match. I don't really think they wanted him dead or anything. They just wanted somebody to humble him, I think they just really wanted somebody to beat some sense into him so he would stop kidnapping the woman. So the goddess Aruru, after hearing their prayers, created Enkidu, a very hairy man with legs like a bull. So Enkidu was placed among the wild beasts, like Tarzan, and he helped them escape traps set by hunters. So that was his life for a while. After a while, Gilgamesh heard of this very strong man with bull legs, and his interest was piqued. So what Gilgamesh did was send a courtesan, which is just another word for prostitute, but a prostitute for rich guys. He sent a courtesan to Enkidu's watering hole. This dude is literally a bull. At first I was thinking that, the legs like a bull thing was just trying to create the image of him having very strong legs, like these big ass quads, but now I'm thinking that he actually had bull legs, and he was actually kind of like a satyr, except like part bull instead of part goat. I have no idea. Anyway, this man literally has a watering hole. But yeah, Gilgamesh sent a prostitute to try to seduce him. And when the prostitute saw Enkidu, she didn't say a word, she just showed him her titties, and he was like, I'm down. This man is too horny for his own good, like a lot of guys that I know. Now this next part just kills me. After finding out that he had slept with someone and lost his V card, his animal companions shunned him. They slut-shamed him, and they were like, "You can't sit with us anymore because you're slutty." So then at that point, he had nothing to do except to follow the prostitute and return with her to Uruk. Meanwhile, Gilgamesh dreamt of wrestling a very powerful man who could overpower him. When he woke up, he told his mother, and she said that it meant that he and Enkidu would become BFFs. Best friends forever. And indeed, when the two men met and they realized they were good wrestling buddies, they became BFFs. And Gilgamesh was like, "Hey man, you should move in." And Enkidu was like, "I'd love to." And thus their epic bromance began. One night Enkidu had a nightmare in which he was plucked up by a terrible creature with eagle claws and cast into the underworld. And of course, this terrified him. He told Gilgamesh about it, and Gilgamesh said, "Don't fret, my brother." And Gilgamesh offered a sacrifice to Shamash, the sun god, who told him to go fight the king of a mountain called Cedar Mountain. This king was called Kumbaba the Strong. I gotta admit, even though Gilgamesh kind of sucks as a person so far, and as a king, he's really pulling through for his friend here. And he's legit about to go fight somebody with the strong in their name, just for his friend. And when everybody in his life heard that he was about to go fight this dude, they were like, "Don't go, it's dangerous." But of course he didn't listen. He was determined. And so Enkidu was like, "Okay, if you insist, then let's go together." Wait, I'm kind of like obsessed with their bromance though. So the pair traveled northwest and crossed a vast desert and eventually made it to Cedar Mountain. Now at this point Enkidu was kind of having doubts. He was getting a little afraid. Aruru might have given him a strong body, but she didn't equip him with a sense of reckless optimism. When they got there, Gilgamesh issued a challenge to Kumbaba. "Kumbaba, I'm here to fight. Come out." But there was no reply. I don't know about you, but if some crazy person outside my house was like, "I'm here to fight," I wouldn't go out. I wouldn't go outside. But you know, these men had great big egos. And because there was no reply, they decided to make a sacrifice to the gods and settle down for the night. And that night, Gilgamesh had a dream of victory. So what I've gathered is that their dreams have extreme significance. And they're not just dreams, they tell the future. And so that's why they went to fight this guy, to save Enkidu from eventually being swept up by a giant eagle and casted to the underworld. In the morning, Kumbaba attacked, and they fought, and just like in his dream, they were victorious over him. Gilgamesh knocked him to the ground where Enkidu cut his head off. Dude, poor guy, it wasn't even a fair fight either. There were two of them. With Kumbaba dead, Gilgamesh decided to cut down the sacred cedar trees on the Cedar Mountain for the temples of Uruk. Gilgamesh and Enkidu bathed, dressed, and made more offerings to the gods. Then, all of a sudden, after Gilgamesh got all settled and dressed and comfortable, the goddess Ishtar appeared. Now, Ishtar was the goddess of sexual love and fertility. And she was like, "Hey Gilgamesh, I heard you were a great hero. I have a really big crush on you, so you should marry me. I'll give you a chariot. Sound good?" And to this he responded, "Girl, you know you're famous for treating your lovers badly, right? There was Tammuz who loved you and hunted for you and you turned him into a wolf. And then there was Izulanu who showered you with gifts but refused to sleep with you and you turned him into a mole. You're just gonna do the same to me eventually, aren't you, baby? So I'm not interested." And she was like, "Fine, don't marry me. See how that works out for you." And she magicked herself away. So when Gilgamesh and Enkidu returned to Uruk, Ishtar was prepared for them. It turns out that after Gilgamesh rejected Ishtar, she went to her mother and father, Antum and Anu, and demanded that they helped her enact her revenge. She wanted her father, the sky god Anu, to release the Bull of Heaven against Uruk, and I'm guessing that the Bull of Heaven was basically just a big bull from heaven. It's rather unclear, I know. And at first her dad was like, "Oh, you know, it's not that big of a deal. A boy rejected you, so what?" But then she threatened him, and she was like, "You don't understand, Daddy. He disrespected me. You better not get in my way." And so Anu gave in. So the Bull of Heaven was released and wreaking havoc on the entire city, you know, creating giant cracks in the ground where people were falling into, etc., etc. It's just so unfair because when Gilgamesh is horny, he's kidnapping all the women, and the people can't catch a break. And, you know, when he's not horny and he has the audacity to reject a goddess, the people get attacked by a giant bull, and they still can't catch a break. There's just no winning. Gilgamesh and Enkidu managed to catch and slaughter this bull, and Enkidu took the bull's thigh and hurled it at Ishtar. And this is where he done fucked up. He was like, "I would do the same to you if I could." Enkidu, this poor sucker, had no idea what he had just gotten himself into. It's believed that Ishtar then laid a mortal curse upon Enkidu, and he got really sick and died 12 days later. I think the epic details the gods coming together about the death of the Bull of Heaven and trying to decide which one of them between Gilgamesh and Enkidu should die. And Ishtar was probably just like, "Psst, it should be Enkidu because I'm more mad about him throwing something at me than Gilgamesh rejecting my sexual advances." Either way, he died. Before he died, he told Gilgamesh about a dream that he had about hell, where kings and princes were forced to work as servants. And Gilgamesh was like, "Oh man, that sounds horrible." When his best friend died, Gilgamesh was, of course, devastated and inconsolable, and realized that he too was only mortal. He didn't want to go to hell, and he knew he was going there because he was a bad person. It's unclear whether they believed in a heaven or not, but there was definitely a hell. So he was like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna go find the secret of immortality. I want to live forever." Dude, doesn't he have any, like, kingly duties? Why is he always going out? Anyway, he went forth in search of a man called Uda-Napishtim, a man to whom the wind god Enlil gave immortality. He went to Mount Mashu, a sacred mountain which was guarded by scorpion men, which I do not understand, but I think that the explanation of that is beyond the scope of this video, so let's just move on. There were men, and they were also scorpions. Gilgamesh was terrified of them, but then again, who wouldn't be? So the chief scorpion man permitted him passage into the mountain, and after a long time in a dark tunnel, he stepped out into the garden of a goddess. And he was like, "Goddess, I'm looking for this man, Uda-Napishtim. I need to be immortal, and he knows how to be immortal." And she was like, "Chill, bro, go home, enjoy life, you know, accept death when it comes, you know? Being human is beautiful." And Gilgamesh was like, "No, but I want to live forever." So then she was like, "All right then, I'll give you instructions to find Uda-Napishtim's boatman." So Gilgamesh went to this boatman, who was like, "Are you sure you want to go? The waters around Uda-Napishtim's house are very turbulent." And Gilgamesh was like, "Yeah, whatever, man, take me to him." Dude, everybody around him is like always trying to dissuade him from doing what he wants to do. Honestly, he doesn't give a fuck, and I'm kind of obsessed. Like, okay, Gilgamesh, get that immortality. Finally, Gilgamesh arrived at the home of Uda-Napishtim. As for why he has a dangerous moat or whatever body of water surrounding or in front of his house is beyond me. But, you know, if I had to guess, it was probably to get some peace and quiet. I imagine if he was living among other people, people, you know, they would make a spectacle of him, like, oh, look at the immortal man. I don't know. So Gilgamesh told Utanapishtim that he wanted eternal life, and Utanapishtim laughed in his face and was like, do you know what I had to do to be immortal? I had to stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights. If you can do that, then I'll tell you. And so Gilgamesh tried, but he was just too tired, so he fell asleep, like, almost immediately. Utanapishtim's wife took pity on Gilgamesh and convinced her husband to tell him the secret, and he was like, fine, okay. And they decided to wake him up and told him that there's a prickly plant that grows at the bottom of the sea. So he was like, oh shit, all right, there's a plant. So he set off immediately to the ocean. And when he got to the ocean, he tied boulders to his feet and plunged in. He sank all the way to the bottom, found this prickly plant, untied the boulders, and swam back to the surface. This guy's just not human. And he was super happy that he could now have everlasting life and could share it with his people, which is actually kind of wholesome, and also probably explains why he didn't eat it right away, so he headed on his way home. After a couple days of traveling, he decided that he needed a bath, and he laid the plant on a rock as he dove into a small lake to bathe. While he was swimming, a snake came up to the plant and ate it. Gilgamesh cried for a long time after that. He was just so frustrated. He realized that the snake would live forever, but man was only mortal. And this was how it was meant to be. I'm sure that was a lot more profound in the poem. I'm just simplifying things. You know, I'm wondering why he couldn't have just gone back and gotten another one. But I think in that moment he realized that mankind was mortal and that was how it was supposed to be, so he just kind of gave up on it. But he really could have just gone back and gotten another one. And it probably wouldn't have been that much of a inconvenience because he's superhuman after all. But yeah, I also cry after every single minor inconvenience. You know, maybe there was only one plant at the bottom of the ocean, who knows. But regardless, he went back to Uruk with a broken heart. And the only thing that really made him feel better was knowing that the walls of Uruk would outlast him as monuments to his reign. And that's the end. So what's the moral of the story? I feel like there are quite a few here. Well, firstly, man is mortal, and so you should live life and accept death when it comes. And 2, don't hurl a bullthigh at a goddess that you know to be very temperamental, otherwise you will die 12 days later. So with that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!